Hello, Silverdale family. As you all know, we have been very fortunate and blessed to have Pastor Mark Habermas on our staff for over 20 years now. And today we have a special treat because what you may or may not know is Pastor Mark's brother, Dr. Gary Habermas, is the world's leading authority on the evidence for the resurrection. And he joins us today. Dr. Habermas, thank you so much for joining us, taking time to join us.
I am glad to be with you, especially celebrate this wonderful, wonderful time of the year.
Absolutely. This upcoming weekend is Easter weekend. We're celebrating the resurrection of Jesus. And Dr. Habermas, just so you know, I have the privilege of teaching an apologetics class at our church on Wednesday nights in the spring. And the last time we had a class session, it was all about the evidence for the resurrection. And I can confirm that a vast portion of what they heard came from this book.
Yeah.
This book is, go ahead.
No, it was meant to be by Mike Lacona and I. It was meant to be kind of a study along. Well, what's one of the chapters named History 101? The whole book is kind of a 101 book. I mean, it's got detailed material and it's got almost 100 pages of notes. So there's scholarship there, but we do it hopefully so that people can take it, use it, apply it, witness, teach, everything.
Absolutely. Well, I can strongly recommend this. We actually gave this book to our loved ones one year at Easter as a gift to everybody because it is such a tremendous resource.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you. So, Dr. Habermas, one of the things you mentioned in that book that I would love for you to explain to everybody, you use what you call the minimal facts approach to the resurrection. Can you tell us what that is?
Sure. The minimal facts argument is, well, the way I use it presently, I've been doing it for a long time, decades, but the way I'm presently doing it, I take 6 facts, which are allowed by virtually every critical scholar who writes. Now, some people think I have a rule that has to be 95% accepted or 90. I've never had a rule like that. But while I don't have a rule, it is true that there's a large number of scholars in that range somewhere who accept it. And my point is they accept the data, but they frequently, some do accept the resurrection, some do not. But the point is all of them allow the facts on which I think the data are based, in which I think if you get these 6, and not just 6 alone, the things that establish these 6 have to be established for a reason and for reasons. And those 6 and what makes them these 6 are sufficient in my mind to show that a resurrection actually occurred on what we call Easter Sunday morning.
Well, so you mentioned decades of research. So after decades of research, if you had to narrow it down to 1 or 2 pieces of evidence that you feel like are the most compelling pieces of evidence that you just can't deny them, what do you think are those 2 pieces of evidence for the resurrection of Jesus?
Well, Evan, that's a great question because, I'll tell you what, I'm not going to pick the ones that most people pick. I'm going to pick two that are more obscure, but are very, very powerful and are allowed by the vast majority of critical scholars, both believers and unbelievers. Number one, let me give a background fact, first of all. The Apostle Paul is the critics' favorite New Testament writer. They love Paul, mostly because a lot of the real critical ones don't think we can know the gospel writers, or at least they may allow Mark and Luke, but they don't think that the apostles wrote either Matthew or John. So because they don't know what to do with they can find great facts in the gospels, but they don't think we know all the authors, at least not to be traced back to an apostle. So Paul is their favorite because, as I like to say to people, he was a guy he was a Pharisee. That means he was a scholar. He basically, we would say today, had a PhD in the Old Testament. And so Paul's the favorite. They will often say he's the only eyewitness of the resurrection that we have in the New Testament that we can be positive of. Okay. Now, having said that about Paul, 3 years after his conversion, Now, this would be either 35 or 36 AD. If the cross is 30, 35 or 36, depends on whether you believe Paul was converted at +2 or +3, which are the most common dates. 3 years later, Paul went to Jerusalem. He spent 2 weeks, 15 days, with Peter, and he also saw James, the brother of Jesus. I think that is either number one or tied with number one, because the critics will often say, well, Paul knew his experience on the way to on the way to Damascus, but how does he know the appearances that the other disciples had? Well, how did he get their testimony? Was it hearsay? Was it telephone tag? Was it, the telephone game where the story keeps getting bigger and bigger? How does he know what the original apostles, the original 12, taught? And I would say because 3 years after his conversion, a very early date, 35 or 36 AD, and again, that's +5 or +6 years after the cross, he went and, let's say, studied under or studied with Peter and James, the brother of Jesus. Now he makes a second trip to Jerusalem in Galatians 2, and critics like the book of Galatians. So they allowed the fact that Paul went there and he spent 15 days with Peter and James. Later he went back with Barnabas, and John is there. Now, what's so key about this is the 4 most influential names in church history: Peter, John of the 12, James, not James of the 12, but James, the brother of Jesus, and Paul. Those are the big 4. And they're all together. In chapter 2, Paul gives them the resurrection, it is a resurrection message, the gospel message that he's been preaching, and they agreed with him. Paul said, they added nothing to me. And later he says in verse 9, Galatians 2:9, they gave Barnabas and me the right hand of fellowship. Now, whatever the right hand of fellowship, however they did that, I don't know if they laid hands on them, if they anointed them and said, go out to the Gentiles. I don't know if it just meant blessings on you, brother, and everybody shook hands. But they gave us the right hand of fellowship. So in this meeting, Paul had the confirmation of those who saw Jesus face to face. I mean, Paul had that too, but Paul, like Paul said, he was not one of the 12. He was, the Greek there is the word for aborted. Paul was one that was not of the others. Well, now he's talking to 3 of the others: Peter and John of the 12, and James, the brother of Jesus. And they all had the same message. I think that's very, very strong, because he's got the eyewitness testimony. He knows his eyewitness testimony, which critics are fine with, but now he's got theirs. The second thing is, in the New Testament, this one's hard to explain. I teach a whole PhD course on it. It's not that it's so heavy, it's that it's so detailed. And in the New Testament, there are dozens of little sayings. They're what we call creeds. And if you read some of them, for example, 1 Corinthians 11, 1 Corinthians 15, both of them, Paul says, I gave you what I was given. In both those cases, Paul's getting it from somebody else. Paul's saying, this is not my material. I believe Jesus was raised, and I talked to the boys in Jerusalem, but I got this creed in 1 Corinthians 15, 3 and following. I got it from somebody else. There's several dozen of those in the New Testament, a couple dozen at least, and they're very, very early. Critics tend to believe that these statements come from the 30s AD. And a number of critics will say that some of these creeds came from just 1 to 2 or 3 years after the cross. As the Jesus Seminar, a very well-known critical group, they voted that the creed of 1 Corinthians 15, 3 and following, it was in existence before Paul was on the road to Damascus. It was already there. That's how early it is. So if he's on this walk at 35 or 36, this creed was in existence before that. And there are critical scholars, atheist New Testament scholars. Garrett Ludeman, he passed away a couple years ago, but an atheist New Testament scholar, and he'll say this testimony of the resurrection, death and resurrection, death, deity, resurrection of Christ, started immediately. And when someone says, well, how do you know it started immediately? These creeds are the answers. So I would say that's the 1-2 punch. The fact that Paul checked it out. Hey, look, the guy's a Pharisee. He's got a PhD in Old Testament. What that means is he knows how to do research. And when he goes to talk to Peter and James, and then later with John, he uses a Greek word in Galatians 1:18. The Greek word is hysteresi. The root word is histor, Histor, when you transliterate. It's a Greek word from which we get the English word history. Now, I'm not saying Paul was playing the historian. That'd be hard to get from that word. But I think what it means is Paul thought he was doing research. He was checking things out. It means to the real easy definition of the word would be to get acquainted with somebody, but the heavier meaning would be he checked out this data. So he was checking out the gospel data with the eyewitnesses, the best known ones, and they all confirmed his message. So you put those two together, Paul got it from the eyewitnesses. And when someone says, well, how do we know that today? The answer is these early creeds. I'll give you an example. Here's one of the best known ones. Romans 10:9. If we confess with our mouth that Jesus is Lord and believe in our hearts that God's raised him from the dead, we will be saved. Now, a few verses later, that's 9 and 10, goes on to talk about 10. 3 verses later, Paul quotes the Old Testament, Joel, and it says, whoever calls in the name of the Lord will be saved. It's as if Paul's saying, when I say confess with your mouth that Jesus is Lord, it's like saying, here's what Joel meant by it. When Joel says, whoever calls on the name of the Lord will be saved, that is the word for Yahweh. That's the word for Jehovah. And so Paul says, if you confess with your mouth that Jesus is Lord, and that's a creed, but 3 verses later he says, Joel meant the Godhead by this verse. And believe in your heart that God's raised from the dead to be saved. That's an early creed. Virtually everybody will agree that that's an early creed. Of course, 1 Corinthians 11, what we Baptists call communion, what others call the Eucharist, Paul starts out, I gave you what I was given. 1 Corinthians 15, I gave you what I was given. I tell people that's a first century footnote. He's saying, this is not mine. Now, I wish he'd put a footnote there and said, I got it from Peter and James in Jerusalem. But these are very, very early source. He got it from the horse's mouth, so to speak. And the texts that we have come from the 30s. And that, by the way, is why you know the texts from the 30s are not phone tag, why they're not hearsay, because Paul checked them out with the big 3, the guys who were there. Peter and James, and later with John was there in chapter 2. So I put those two, 1-2, tied for first place, something like that.
That is awesome. I love that. Thank you so much. And like you said, if the Jesus Seminar, if they can agree that it was less than 5 years after the events, then that is major evidence that it really was less than 5 years, because they are very skeptical about
now
many
they said
things.
it wasn't unanimous, but they did say that was the majority view. The majority view said that creed in 1 Corinthians 15 was in existence before Paul left for Damascus. That's amazing.
That is amazing. And you got me, because somebody earlier asked me if I thought what 2 pieces of evidence I thought you were going to say, and you didn't use either one of them. So you got me. That was good.
If I had to give a third one, this might be getting close. The appearance of Jesus, and by the way, footnote, there are more appearances of Jesus to groups, 2 or more people. There are more appearances of Jesus in the New Testament to groups than there are to individuals. That's really significant. And the appearance that is the best evidenced is the appearance to the 12. You go, why not the 500? Well, the 500 is good because it's listed in that early creed in 1 Corinthians 15. That's why that's good. But the 12, we have multiple sources on its behalf. So if I had to go a third one, I would say the appearance to the 12. That's reported both in Paul's creed and in the Gospel of Luke, the Gospel of John. We get it right there. It's in the book of Acts over and over.
That's awesome.
Which one did you take?
Well, so I thought the two you would say was one was Paul's changed life, the apostles' changed lives, that no one willingly dies for a lie they know they've made up.
That's fair.
And then I also thought you would use the fact that Christianity arose from Jerusalem, and that if Jesus hadn't risen from the dead, all they'd have to do is produce a body, and that squelches Christianity.
Right. And the Jerusalem thing, when you combine it with the women going to the tomb, those are the two best sources for the empty tomb. That who would pick women when they were not? This is just not a Jewish problem. People go, oh yeah, Jews are funny. They don't let women talk. Actually, in a major article by a female New Testament scholar, she said that wasn't just Jews. She said that was the attitude toward women around the entire Mediterranean world. So if four different people from four different places in the empire are talking about the resurrection, why do they all say women if by saying women you just cut yourself out of your best source? And there's an answer for that. They all said women because that's how it went down. That's how it happened.
Amen.
So therefore, the women going to the tomb is a great reason. And the other one is what you just mentioned, Jerusalem. If the women went to the tomb in Rome, I'm not going to get on a boat and go to Rome to check it out. But in Jerusalem, the critics, the Pharisees and Sadducees, they could walk down to the tomb on a Sunday afternoon walk and find out that there's no body in the tomb. So that's very good for the empty tomb.
Well, you've excited me to go read more and everything. I've learned stuff just in this short conversation. Like, I'm gonna go back and take notes. Like, this is fantastic.
Well,
And
I get excited when I'm doing it too. I mean, I've done this lecture one like it thousands of times, and I don't have to put on a show to act excited. I am excited. This is what took me from my doubts. It's what rescued my family and I when the mother of my four children died of stomach cancer in 1995. I'm remarried, but their mother died stomach cancer, and it came to the rescue, the resurrection. We knew that the same Lord would resurrect her and would resurrect each of us at the right time. So it was, and Easter's coming up. I mean, unlike Christmas, we know this is the right time of the year. May not be the right day, but the right time. We know it's a spring event. And so that's another reason I'm excited. We're getting close to the big day.
absolutely. Well, so you have a major project going on right now. The culmination of all these decades of research are being put together in a format for everybody in the world to consume. It's my understanding that you have 3 different volumes that are going to be released of massive amounts of research that you've done. One of them is already out. One is coming up, I believe, in just a few months. So can you let us know about those 3 volumes and where we could find those?
Yeah, there's actually four volumes.
Oh, okay.
Now the three is right for something. 3 of them are already at the publishers.
Okay,
I'm working on the 4th one right now. The next one is due in September, and the first one is called Evidence, and it's almost 1,100 pages. It's the evidence of the resurrection. The second one is called Refutations, and it goes after all the natural theories that deny natural, and there's a few non-natural, but all the theories that go after resurrection in some way. It critiques all of those, and that is 900 pages.
And then I have, assuming the swoon theory would be involved in that one.
It absolutely is. So's hallucination. Those are, you're going to hear a lot more about hallucination today than the swoon theory. Almost nobody even dreams of taking the swoon theory. But yeah, so that book is 900, and there's 2 more. But the last one is volume 4. I'm working on it today. It's what sense does the resurrection make of theology and practice? Why is the resurrection the center of our theology and the center of our practice? It's what pastors use at funeral sermonettes. It is related to the family. It is related to, obviously, the Lord's Supper. It's related to the resurrection is tied to almost every area of theology, at least major theology. and almost every area of practice in the New Testament. So that's volume 4 is more practical application.
That is awesome. And so we can find that volume 1 that's already released and on sale now. We can find it, I'm assuming, on Amazon. Could we find it on your website? Where could we find that one?
It's on Amazon for sure. It's called On the Resurrection, Evidences. They're all 4 volumes are called On the Resurrection, something. And the first one's Evidences. The second one's Refutations. But
gotcha.
It's available on Amazon. And strangely enough, this thing was thousands of volumes they printed. And the book is expensive. Now, you can get it for a lot less than this, but the book sells for $80, volume 1. Well, it's sold out. The whole first printing sold out in a week and a half.
That's awesome.
So they've already got a second printing in, and they've already got a third printing ordered. So a lot of books out there.
I mean, it's fantastic when you hear, people say, well, what's the evidence for the resurrection? And you can hand them an 1,100-page document to show them the evidence for the resurrection.
I don't do this here because of lectures. I do it because I look at it and get things out of it while I'm studying. This is the book right here. It's huge. It's almost like a small phone book. There you go.
That's awesome.
How wide it is. And it's oversized. It won't fit. I have professional shelves in here built for me in my study, and this will not fit on the shelf. It's too big. I have to move it out like this. So, yep, it's big. There's a lot of information. There are a lot of footnotes.
Well, Dr. Habermas, thank you so much for taking time to talk with us. We love your brother, and we love you, and we are so appreciative of your ministry, literally worldwide, because there's no telling when you get to heaven. I hope we get to know just how many people your work has impacted all over the world. It is an awesome thought to think how many people's lives have been changed because of what they've read from what you've written.
I appreciate that. People, when they think authors just want to sell books, I could care less about selling books compared to the ministry influence. To me, the ministry influence, not just of this book, but any of mine. I have a lot on the resurrection, a lot of books. I'm interested in the ministry value, what it does, who comes a little closer and somebody else takes them over the edge, to Christianity. What is it? If you're right and there's a lot of people influenced, I am totally joyous. That's way better than how many copies the book sells. I've made the point about the books selling out in a week and a half only because I was super surprised at $80 that they were sold out so quickly. Now, like I said, you can get them less expensive, but Amazon.com, I think you can. It's published by Brahman Holman Academic, which is the Southern Baptist major publisher. Either place, Lifeway, which is the parent organization for Brahman Holman. You can get them at Lifeway. In fact, I'm pretty sure Lifeway still, I'm not positive, but I think Lifeway at least was selling them for a pretty big discount.
Well, that's good to know. And we'll look forward to seeing that new one come out this September as well. That's very exciting as well. Right. As soon as you mentioned, I actually had a gentleman just last 2 weeks, mention the hallucination excuse or argument to me. So as soon as you mentioned that as included in the refutations one, I immediately thought, well, I'm going to get it for him so you can read it.
It's a big chapter too, because I do about, 5 different forms of it. So.
Well, this has been a special treat for all of us, especially me. I was so excited to get to talk with you. So thank you so much, Dr. Habermas. We really appreciate you.
Thank you, Evan. Enjoyed talking to you. And thanks for being a Liberty grad too. I didn't know that. I didn't know it till you wrote to me. So that's something else we share. Glad to hear that.